So this is what we're hoping that we're going to cover off in this session this morning. So we're going to start with sort of perhaps some of the theory. So that sort of takes you up until sort of the digital platforms bit. And then Lisa's going to talk in some more detail about some of the actual practical things you can do and some of the tools that you can use. I'm going to fairly rattle through it because there is quite a lot of slides to this presentation. If I'm going too fast at any point, obviously do tell me to slow down. Equally, if you've got any questions, as Lisa said, you can either put them in the chat, or if they're really pertinent to a particular point in the presentation, please do just take yourself off mute and ask the question. Don't mind being interrupted at all. So we started, but when we started thinking about this, I think it's really about the sort of the landscape that we find ourselves in now. Obviously, COVID's changed everything sort of quite dramatically over the last 18 months. We've had to look at sort of changes to the way sort of our community feels about going to halls, and the whole impact of sort of the loneliness and the isolation, people being locked away through sort of lockdown, things like that. And obviously, as the people who run village halls, you've had to cope with this ever-changing sort of background of different legislation and rules and recommendations that you need to comply with to keep people safe who are using your halls, and that's in between sort of having to shut it down and reopen it, and shut it down and reopen it again. So it's been a hugely sort of challenging landscape for us all. But I think what we always say about challenges and things like that is that they always do present sort of some new opportunities as well. So we have to sort of be poised to take advantage of those things when they crop up. So just thought it might be quite helpful, and I mean, this is, again, it's just something I'm happy for people to take themselves off mute and have a little sort of shout out at this point, is what do you think the sort of key challenges are that you as a hall are facing following the COVID pandemic? So I don't know if anybody's got any thoughts on that, whether you just want a little moment to think.
Probably overcoming the government's very efficient brainwashing of the public at large.
Yeah, I think there is something in that. I certainly think the message about being fearful has sunk in, and people are now very concerned about going back out again. So I do agree that is something that I think a lot of us are having to think about how we overcome. Yeah.
Can I say something?
Yeah, please do. Yes.
Our challenge is because we're losing a preschool, we have nothing in the village hall, and we're looking at changing our charitable objectives, which is going to be a minefield.
Yes. Yeah. And that's because the preschools moved on or found new premises?
The preschool is now going to go from January into the village school.
Right. Okay. So yes, I think that's something we've seen happen as well, sort of changing user groups as a result of the pandemic. Yeah.
And we've got currently nobody booked.
Right. Anybody else?
I think for us, in Gambling Gate, the main difficulty is being able to plan ahead. I'm sort of supposed to be in charge of the marketing for it, and my marketing plan that I had for 2020 went into tatters. 2021 has gone into tatters as well.
Yeah.
And it's hard to be able to plan with any certainty events or things in the future. I mean, we are trying to do it, but you're always doing it with one hand, thinking, well,
am I wasting my time? Yeah. I think that's something we've seen, and it's certainly something as an organisation, which I don't think we're a charity like a lot of you. We're not dissimilar. You're trying to plan ahead. Equally, you're thinking, well, am I wasting my time? Is this all going to have to be put by the by when the next lockdown happens? And so I think yes, we've seen that. We run a project, a rural touring project. It's about taking sort of live performances out to village halls. We're finding it very, very difficult for the village halls to feel they're committed to the project, but the thought of actually having to put all the effort in for something that might get cancelled at the last moment is sort of quite sort of disillusioning for people, I think. So yeah, I think that's a really good thing that we've faced as well. I'll bring up the slide that some of the things that we thought about, Lisa, if you wouldn't mind. So I think you're right. I think, you know, the whole uncertainty and the fearfulness that perhaps the pandemic has created, and you know, people are very sort of unsure about, you know, how quickly and how sort of full on to sort of resume activities. I think you're right about changing use as well. I think, you know, sometimes we find that sort of this sort of whole sort of pause in activity has given people sort of pause for thought, and they've then thought, well, perhaps we can do things differently. Or perhaps we deliver it from a different location. I think things like, you know, some activities, I know the people who run those activities traditionally in village halls have found ways of taking them online, you know, and that means they don't need the village hall anymore, and that's a sad thing, because it's sort of just perpetuating this thing that we all just sit in our own homes and we don't go out and we don't engage with other people. One of the other ones that we think, and we've sort of seen quite a lot through the advice and support that we give, is sort of trustees feeling quite burnt out by the whole thing. You know, you've had 18 months of, you know, constantly changing regulations, lockdowns, opening up again, and, you know, eventually you just think, oh, do you know what, I'm worn out. So I think, you know, that's something we've certainly seen. And one of our later sessions that we're going to do as part of this project is about sort of engaging new trustees and new volunteers, because we have had, you know, a lot of halls tell us that they're suffering from that, you know, people just giving up because they've had enough. So obviously this, you know, re-engaging groups again after the pandemic's been a real sort of challenge, you know, getting people to commit to restarting their activities. And I think, you know, one of the other things we've noticed as well is people beginning to think about, you know, do they have the right skills in their sort of management committee? You know, have people got the right skills and attributes to sort of contribute to what the hall now needs going forward to really take it forward again? I touched on recruiting new trustees, but that's something that through the last ACRE survey was something that people very much felt was something they struggled with. So again, that's one of the reasons why we've chosen to do some more training on that in due course. So focusing on why good publicity and marketing is key to sort of tackling those challenges. I think, you know, what's really clear, as you can see here, is that obviously if you issue very succinct and strong communications about your hall, so that people in the local community know what happens at your hall, so you'll get increased interest from your local community, which should lead to increased bookings. If people see a well-run, well-used village hall, I think there's a greater likelihood that people will step forward to help you run it, so more volunteers. And obviously all those things lead to a more thriving village hall overall. I think, you know, one of the things I would say here is that marketing is one of those jobs that sometimes gets pushed to the bottom of the pile. I think we sometimes see it as a nice thing to do. And again, thinking about our own experience at Cambridgeshire ACRE, you know, and as I say, we're a charity very much like a lot of you. For several years, we pushed sort of that marketing aspect of our own organisation to the bottom of the pile. It always felt there was something more important to do. But eventually we've realised that sort of actually marketing is absolutely key. It's a key management function that is just as important as any other aspect of good governance. And that's probably why you've seen a bit more of a focus on our marketing activities recently with a new brand and a new website, etc. So we've been through this whole exercise of understanding that actually, you know, if you want people to use your services, you have to tell them what it is you can offer people very, very clearly. So I'm going to hand over to Lisa now, who's going to just sort of, perhaps if you like, almost take us back a quick step, which is just about knowing your charitable objectives, because that's quite important when considering what your marketing strategy should be. So.
Thanks, Alison. So, of course, understanding the governance structure of your charity is the most important aspect, really. The majority of village halls that we work with in Cambridgeshire, they are all charitable. We have a few where the parish council run them on their statutory duties, but the vast majority of halls are charitable. So I think my question to you this morning is, do you know what your charitable objects are? If you don't, check your governing document It's really important that that trustees are familiar with their governing document and understand all of the key aspects of it, not just about what who's elected to the charity, but also knowing and understanding the key points like the objects, but also there's some, as you read through your document, there can be some quirky little things thrown in. So it's really important that trustees understand it, look at the governing document on a regular basis and review it. The Charity Commission suggests that you review your governing document at least every 5 years, just to make sure that that it is up to date and it's relevant, especially around I can think of one very common thing around the makeup of your committee and representative groups as an example. So most governing documents through the objects will actually say that you're there to provide recreational activities, and that you're there in the interest of social welfare and to improve the conditions of life for your local residents. Sometimes, and this is why you really need to have a look at your governing document, there will be bespoke wording for your particular charity, and that may have stemmed from that the land was given by the church, or the land was given by a landholder who had a particular view in terms of how that charity should function. And the last point that we've got on the slide here about halls managed by parish councils, they do have more freedom really and are less restricted if a parish council is running a community facility under their statutory duties, unless of course there's always an unless of course with my job, unless you're a parish council that is a sole trustee of a charity, and then obviously they will have the restrictions in terms of the same as any other charity. So let's just have a quick look at what the model document, the ACRE model document, the objects set down in that template is shown here on the screen, and it actually is quite familiar. I'm sure when you see this, you'll think it's very familiar with your own governing document. So you need to think of your objects in terms of, when you're thinking about marketing, you need to think of it in terms of promoting your hall and making sure that you're staying within the remit of your objects in all of your promotions. So that's why we're saying you need to have a really good understanding of it. And of course, check in your governing document for any covenants that might be there. We have seen odd documents that actually prohibit the sale of alcohol, for example. So have a good check and just make sure that when you are actively promoting your charity, that you are doing it within what is set in your governing document. So another aspect of what you need to consider when you're setting out to market your facility is your hierarchy of beneficiaries. And this will seem hopefully very familiar to all of you in terms of the way it's set out here in the 4 tiers. And I quite often have this conversation with people where there's conflict between, somebody wants to hire the wedding, hire their venue for a wedding, and they want exclusive use of the car park, but that maybe interferes with something that's going on a regular basis on the playing field, for example. So your charity does need to put this hierarchy into place in terms of when you're receiving your bookings and putting this into consideration. So the majority of your bookings, trustees should prioritise it so that points 1 and 2 on this slide clearly fit within the objects of your charity. And commercial bookings should obviously take a less prominent setting for your facility. And sometimes the booking secretaries do have to be a bit creative in terms of how they manage this, because the private bookings, the commercial hiring, they're the things that are there supporting your charitable objects, and quite often, you know, that's the bread and butter money that's keeping everything else ticking over. So I do appreciate there is an art to this, in juggling and managing it, but the slide there really sets out the priorities in which you need to be considering those bookings. The other things that you might have within your within your venues are non-recreational activities, and again, many of these will be so important to your communities, in terms of how we're seeing services reducing in rural areas, but many of these are so important to your communities. And you know, this really slide is just setting out those other areas that might run into conflict in terms of some of your regular bookings. But again, it's that balancing act about making sure that that you're catering for everybody in the community while considering that hierarchy of hirers. Okay, Alison, I think this is back to you.
Yeah, so I thought it's just worth going back and revisiting what marketing actually is. And I think, you know, because there's a couple of you who definitely perhaps felt your marketing knowledge was on the lesser side. I think this is a good place to start when we start looking at marketing. So this is what the Chartered Institute of Management should say, marketing, goodness, says that marketing is. So it should be about identifying what your customers need. So there's sort of an element around market research. It's about planning ahead, so working out what people might want in the future. It's about making sure that you then satisfy that need, so what people actually want. And obviously, ultimately, it's about making sure that what you're doing is sustainable. There's no point in doing something that's not overall, you know, at the end of the day, not going to contribute towards the sustainability of your organisation. So if we actually break that down, Lisa, on the next slide, please. Which is about how to develop a marketing strategy, and we sort of really advise a sort of a 5-step approach to this. So, and I will talk through these 5 steps in more detail, taking each one in turn. But essentially, it's about identifying what your users' needs are, and that's about understanding your current customers and you know, potential customers. I think it's about understanding what's the USP of your hall, what's your unique selling point, what does your hall have to offer people that perhaps other places don't have. It's always about ensuring that what you're offering is value for money and benefits your community. There's another point there about, you know, once you've got things up and running, how do you evaluate what you're doing? How do you know whether what you're providing is really what people need? So there's something about, it's almost a sort of cyclical process of review and evaluation. And then it's about working out what you're going to promote and doing it often. You know, it's not a one-off activity. It's not something you just do once and then say, tick that, done that. You have to keep on doing it. So if we look at these steps in a little bit more detail now. So the first one, which was around identifying your user needs. And there's some ideas there for things that you could do to actually work out what your users actually need. And so, you know, there's lots of ways of doing this. You know, you can do things like surveys, but actually just talking to people, you know, particularly if you've got a sort of a reasonable sized management committee, if they each just ask everybody they know, you know, you'll get a fairly good view about sort of, you know, what people actually want from your village hall. If your community is doing any kinds of community-led plan or neighbourhood planning activity, and that, you know, sometimes you find that sort of, you know, your parish council might be doing something like this. So if you could piggyback on the back of something else that's already happening in your community, and find a way of asking some additional questions about your village hall, just so you get some feedback. Obviously, for people who are coming into your hall, there's things like you could have a suggestions box, and I don't know how many of you at the end of a hire, particularly sort of perhaps not so much your regular hirers, because you probably have more of a relationship with them anyway, but sort of your one-off hirers, if you ask them for some feedback on how they found using your hall, what they found good, what they found bad, was there anything in the sort of the bookings process that could have been improved, things like that, then actually that's all valuable sort of intelligence that you can then feed into your sort of your sort of management processes. I think research what other people are doing, have a look round. I mean, I don't know whether you ever jump onto the websites of other village halls, but see what other people are doing, because you can learn an awful lot from seeing what others are doing. I think particularly your near neighbours, look at the halls who you would perhaps consider to be your competitors. We obviously know that for the most part, village halls sort of tend to serve quite a sort of a local population, but obviously when we start thinking about those more sort of commercial bookings that Lisa was talking about, where perhaps people do travel a little bit, what are other people doing? What have they got that you could perhaps pinch the idea? Think about looking at what sort of other people, what other local organisations and things are going on in your community. Is there something that perhaps there's a sort of an unmet need? Then you may find that there's somewhere else that's delivering activities for older people, for example, but is there anybody doing anything for young people, or vice versa? So I think it's good to sort of look in your sort of local village magazine, if there is one, see what's going on, and those are the people you can then reach out to as potential customers and say, oh, you don't use our hall, would you like to come and have a look round, see what we could offer you? And I think that's what I'm saying at that bottom point there is, see where the gaps are, and then where to target. That's what all that research will do for you, is get you to a point where where you can be a bit more targeted in what you do. Right, so I talked about unique selling points earlier, a bit of marketing jargon, I'm afraid, but it is a good thing to think about. It's something that I think we're very terribly British about this. We sometimes sort of undersell what we do, what we have in our halls. Oh gosh, we're only a tiny hall, or we don't have an awful lot going for us, or oh dear, our kitchen facilities are a bit rubbish. But everybody has got something special about their hall. Be it its location, be it it's got a fabulous large car park, be it that it's got the stage and all the facilities there. So start to think about what are the really positive things about your hall. What are the things that you can really sell to people as being a sort of a good thing for coming to use your facility? Why should they come to you? I think and then tying that back to sort of if I don't know, if there's a drama group, and you can provide a stage and sort of a good sound system, things like that. You can then, if you know what's special about your hall, you can then really target the people who might benefit from those special features. And equally, I think there is something there, if we're going to go back to being terribly British and saying, gosh, we're all a bit rubbish here, you can say, well, so what could we do? What are the things that we're not doing well, and how could we improve those things? Is there anything we can do at, reasonably low cost to sort of improve what we can offer to people? I think that's important as well. We talked about, do you provide value for money? And I think, that it is important to be quite critical sometimes of yourselves, and that's how we all learn and move forward, isn't it? Is, take a critical look at what you provide. What do people see when they turn up at your hall? Equally, what do they see if they look online for your hall? I think, we're going to talk about digital later, and that is, first impressions do count, so having a well-presented building, but equally a well-presented online presence is really quite important these days. So, and I think, these things do tend to come back to money a lot of the time. So when we talk about the things that you might need to improve, you obviously do need to consider whether you have the funds to do that, the cost of providing it. But one thing we have found throughout this whole sort of pandemic is that, because halls in a lot of cases, particularly the charitable ones, have benefited from some local authority grants, some halls we are finding are sitting on some little pots of money, and they aren't really quite sure what to do with it. and actually this might be one of the things that you might invest some of that money into, because it might be about, you know, this might be your opportunity to invest into your marketing and invest into sort of, you know, the way you're presenting yourself, and that hopefully will then lead to more bookings. And I think sorry, Lisa, I was just going to say that final point there, just about hire charges, is if that's not something you've looked at in a while, this might be a good time to look at that. Having the right hire charges is a key part of your marketing strategy. And if you're not sure about how to set your hire charges, our model hire agreement does give some guidance on that, but it is about ensuring that your costs are being covered through the charges you make for your hires. So we can, you know, Lisa gives lots of advice to people on that. So if that's something you need help on, please do ask us. We talk about sort of evaluating sort of what you're doing. So I think there's some early evaluation you can do about, you know, who uses your hall and when. And this is sort of just a little sort of chart that you could use to do that. So start to look at the types of people, because obviously different groups come in at different times of day. You know, you're not going to get sort of you know, after school activities obviously have to happen after school, so that, you know, there's a particular time slot in your bookings calendar that those activities are going to be looking for. So I think it is about, you know, taking a good look at your bookings calendar, working out, you know, where the gaps are in that, which slots you've got to offer, and then thinking about the types of groups that might want to fill those slots, because there's no point in saying to, you know, come and hold your children's party in a weekday morning, because, you know, the kids are in school at that time. So there's no point in targeting your marketing activities that are never going to take place in the particular time slots you've got available. So I think that's a key thing to just have a think about as well. And the next bit I was just going to say to you is, I don't know whether any of you have ever conducted a SWOT analysis before. I suspect most of you, if you've been worked in any big organisation, have probably been put through this at one point. But it's about looking at your strengths and your weaknesses, and then your opportunities and your threats. So, you know, obviously these are things that you can. Some of these are things you can do something about. And some of them are things that, you know, you can't change, so you might have to look at different ways of doing those things. But again, it comes back to, you know, understanding your USP, and then, you know, thinking about what the opportunities might be that you could capitalize on, and equally looking at those threats and thinking that, you know, how do we avoid that happening? Is there anything we can do as a committee, as a management committee, to address those weaknesses and those threats? So I think, you know, that's a good exercise to do. If you know, if your committee sort of sets aside perhaps a time at its meeting when you can sit down and just sort of brainstorm all that together, I think it's quite a useful exercise, because it does make you think about what are the things that perhaps you should be focusing on, and equally, I say the strengths and the opportunities obviously feed into your marketing, but the weaknesses and the threats are those things that you can then think, well, hang on, as a management committee, do we need to tackle any of these now before the problems get worse or actually come to pass? And that last point there is about sort of promoting and marketing often. As I said, it's not a one-off activity, marketing and promotion. You just need to keep at it. And obviously there's various ways that you can do that. You know, there's obviously sort of the sort of more traditional sort of offline methods. So, you know, stick things on notice boards, you know, have a pack of things. If anybody rings up, you can, you know, send them information, you know, displays and posters, you know, give presentations, things like that. But then equally, you know, we're going to look at this the websites and the social media aspect of this later on today. And also, in our November coffee morning, we're going to do a bit of a case study, if you like, on building a new website. One of the village halls who we work with has been through that process quite recently, and they've offered to sort of talk to people about their experiences. And I think that's you know, if you don't have a website, that might be quite an interesting session for people to come along to. The other thing I just would say is that very final point there about your story. you know, it's something as Cambridgeshire ACRE we're very aware of, because we've worked with the village halls in the county for sort of 100 years coming up now. In 2024 it will be 100 years, but you know, there's some fabulous histories out there. You know, some of these are sort of wonderful buildings that have got these sort of really quite sort of dramatic histories in places. So, you know, please make sure if you do have a website, or you do, you know, you capture that history somewhere, because that's actually sort of what brings your hall to life. And you know, so tell the story of your hall and the people that use it, and what you plan to do for the future, because people are interested in that. Right, okay, so time for another little poll. I'm not sure whether I'm going to have to run it or whether Lisa could. I think, shall I run this one, Lisa?
Yeah, I'll see.
Okay.
No, I haven't got access to it.
Okay, let me run it. Okay, let's go to the next one. So this is our poll on your online presence. So I'm just going to launch that now. So I'm just asking about what digital communications you currently have at your hall, because I think this is quite interesting for us to find out, you know, what people have currently got. Wow, looks like it's interesting. Okay, so I think that's everybody voted now. So if I end the poll and share the results with you, that's quite interesting, and you know, it is perhaps a reflection of perhaps what we expected to know as well, which is that looks like everybody's got some sort of online presence in terms of a website, or perhaps a page on somebody else's website, perhaps a parish council website or a community website. So that is really great. Facebook, looks like nearly everybody's got to grips with Facebook. Perhaps one hall out there perhaps hasn't. And you know, the other social media that perhaps, you know, people are using these days, so Twitter and Instagram, not as popular with village halls. And you know, that's probably what we would expect to see. So that's an interesting thing, and it sort of provides some context for the session that we're going to come on to next. I think just to look at sort of, I just wanted to sort of look and see what the national survey findings says, and in fact it looks like Cambridgeshire might be ahead of the national picture, because nationally only 91% of village halls have their own website, and only 55% have a Facebook page. So actually, you know, 90% of the people at this session have got a Facebook page. So you know, that is good that you know, people obviously in this, well, perhaps it's just the people who've come to this session, but it is, you know, it's good to see that so many people are trying to take these social media on board, because there's definitely a trend in the general population to look to websites and social media for information. So it is vitally important. So excellent. Okay, right. I think we were going to have a quick sort of 5-minute break now, just if that's okay with people, just to let us catch our breath and let you grab a coffee. I appreciate you've been talked at a lot for the last 40 minutes. So just if anybody's got any questions, perhaps before we go to a break.
Yeah, I've got one.
Hi, Malcolm.
Yeah, just a quickie. Excellent presentation. Can we get a copy of it, please?
Of course, yeah, yes, this will be circulated, and we'll also circulate the YouTube link as well. So if you want to share this session with anybody else, you can do that as well. Yeah. Any other questions at this point? No, looks like. Oh, hello, Margaret.
As I've said, we've got to change our charitable objectives if we're going to market anything. Do you give any help and support with that, or do we have to do it ourselves?
No, we're very comfortable to help you with that, Margaret. I think in the chat you were saying that your charitable objectives are quite restrictive, and that you can only offer activities for children. So yeah, I'm sure that's something we could work with you on and give you some advice on how to deal with the Charity Commission on that one. And
it's linked to the church as well. All right.
Okay.
And the vicar is a trustee. Okay.
Right. Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, if we do it offline, you come to us when you're ready to discuss, and we'll happily give you some advice if we can. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Thanks.
Alison, Mike's just added a question in the chat, just in case everybody can't see it, but it's Mike says that you tend to use the Facebook page, the village Facebook page, rather than having your own. So I don't know if there's any thoughts from others. Do you all have your own Facebook pages, or do you share just the village chat one? How do other people work it?
At Fen Drayton, we have our own, but we also link to the Village Life one.
Yeah, we do that in Gamlinge as well. So we have our own, so we can put, you know, pretty much what we like on it, and we share things that have interest in the whole village. Not everything, because some of it's a bit commercial for the village website pages, but I share as much as I can, but sharing it out to other, and that way you can share wider. You can share to the next door village, because on most villages that you can share to the different types of Facebook pages as well that other villages have got.
Sounds like a good way to me. I mean, I think having your own one is great, because as you say, you're not then restricted on what you put on it. You put anything you like on it. But yes, the ability in Facebook to share to different pages or share to groups as well is great, because it allows you to get your message out to an even larger audience. So yeah, good plan. Okay, right. Shall we have a little rest? So focusing in on digital marketing. And you can see what this sort of definition, if you like, at the top there is. So it talks about brands, promoting your brand to connect with your potential customers. And I guess what I would just say is, obviously in the context of village halls, your brand is your village hall and your potential customers are your hall users. So you can use digital marketing to promote your village hall to potential hall users. And digital marketing includes things like your emails, your social media, and any sort of web-based advertising. So that's what we're going to be looking at next. So how can digital marketing help? I think the thing I would say is that more and more people are heavily reliant on digital marketing, almost perhaps to the exclusion of other things now. More and more you see that's the way things are going. I think that second point about digital is sort of getting old quite quickly. There used to be a saying, didn't there, about sort of today's news being sort of tomorrow's chip wrappers, and I think even more so with digital. It's because it's instantaneous. Equally, it gets old very quickly, and I'm sure those of you who are on sort of village Facebook pages and things like that will be aware that sort of sometimes you can see things and they blow up quite quickly, and lots of people are getting involved and all having a go at one another and all ranting and raving, but then it's very quick. It's almost like it's as fast as it becomes an issue, it's gone again. So I think that's something else to bear in mind with digital, and it comes back to that point about doing it often. Because these things are sort of quite fleeting, you have to sort of keep your presence up in order to keep being presented in front of people, so they become more aware of you. I think, obviously it's, when we've seen this again with sort of village Facebook pages and community websites, things like that, the digital is a very good way of letting people know what's going on locally and what might impact on them. And I think, again, more and more people, when they look for information for things, they don't, perhaps in the old days, people might have gone to the library or looked in the telephone directory or things like that. More and more these days, people will definitely jump online and search for the thing they want help with. So having a good digital footprint is one way to make sure you're always at the forefront of people's minds. And I think just the things that people, how digital can help, the things it can be used for. So that final bullet point is this is what people are using digital tools for. So for campaigning. I mean, I think you'll have seen sort of in recent days with this whole situation in Afghanistan, there's been lots and lots of sort of social media and digital things about how you can contribute, how you can donate, how you can offer help, things like that. So digital becomes a very, very powerful tool in that kind of situation. Spreading awareness. I think the calls to action is something I'm going to talk about a little bit later, but in terms of sort of your digital marketing, knowing what you want people to do as a result of what you're putting out there is a real key thing. So what we're going to look at next is some of the actual tools that you can use to sort of begin to use in your digital marketing. So I think Lisa's going to do some of the next little bits for me. Thank you.
So here we've got a list of some free digital tools that you can use, and some of you might be familiar with them already, or maybe you haven't even tried for example, using a survey tool like this, but they're worth having a look at. I'd like to say they're all relatively easy to use. I think they are, but I think it's about practice. So I think probably from my advice from today was, if you haven't actually tried any of these digital tools, they're easy to find. You can Google them. In some cases, you will need to set up an account or already have an existing account, like for example, Gmail. You'll need a Gmail account to be able to use Google Forms. But have a look at them, have a play with them, because they are, I mean, it's kind of changed the way that we communicate with people, I think very successfully. And I think for a village hall, I know some village halls who have already used them for sending out newsletters, for you know, doing a general quick survey of their community, of their hirers. So they can be really useful tools, really flexible, and I think have a look at them, investigate which one suits you best, because I think they all have their own sort of systems, and some will appeal to you and others won't. We use Smart Survey as an example, and we'll be sending out our annual survey to you all shortly, a village hall survey, and that's developed on Smart Survey. And the tool is really good because it will also, not only are you've got the ability to set up really useful survey questions, but what sits behind the system is also the analysis element. So it will help you develop a report. It will help you pull out the information that you need in order to find out the key questions and the answers that you want from the survey that you've put. So you know, my recommendation is have a search. If you have a problem using any of these the tools, not just the survey tools, but any of the things that we're going to talk about today, and you want a hand or anything, we can always do a Zoom session with you, talk to you about the application, help you sign up, help you set up your first survey or whatever it is you want. But I would, you know, have a go, would be my overriding message on all of this stuff today. It's unbreakable, so just have a go and see what you can do with it. So one of the important things to do from the marketing point of view is to talk to your users, as it says here. You know, encourage your if you've already got your Facebook page set up, which by the sounds of the poll most of you have, you know, encourage people to like your Facebook page and to follow your Facebook page. It's an easy way of you know, getting into your communities and getting that conversation flowing with your communities. Getting your hirers. I'm going to kind of like use one of my own examples with this aspect. I was about 2 years ago, I was trying to find a yoga class locally, and it was much harder than I expected it to be. I kind of looked on Facebook, but my local village halls around me weren't active on Facebook, or if they were on Facebook, they weren't using that link between their hirers posting on there. So they were still relying on the fact that you'd have to go to the village hall, look at the notice board and see what classes were actually on. So from a user perspective, it would have been really useful for me if the hirers, you know, the local yoga teacher or Pilates teacher or whoever is able to, you know, post an advert, come to my class on a Wednesday evening or whatever. This is how you book up to join. Having that kind of the working together aspect, I think would be really useful. So it might be something that if you don't do it already, you might want to talk to you know, the people who are running your classes about, you know, have they got material that they want to post on your Facebook page, because it will join up those dots for local people. One of the things that would be useful for you to do in terms of the newsletter aspect is about building a database. And the one thing you need to think about when building a database is obviously the GDPR regulations. So don't forget, and you can link this kind of to the survey aspect. If you're doing a survey and you're collecting people's email addresses, don't forget to have a kind of a box at the bottom which is asking their permission to be able to hold their details on your database, and that you're going to communicate with them, and are they happy for that. We can give you advice around GDPR if you're not already currently doing it, but just bear that in mind when you are collecting information and holding information. But once you've got people's email addresses, you've done your survey, you've spoken to your community, they've given permission for you to have their contact details. By having an email address and being able to then use whatever platform you choose to send out a quarterly newsletter or events information, it's a great way of keeping people in touch and you know, keeping them involved in the news and activities that are going on at you know, at your facility. And the last point here is absolutely key, and one I struggle with on a kind of a regular basis about is what is the right balance in terms of the information that you're sending out. So it's making sure, and you've all had emails from me, and I do apologize if you get too many, but it's the way information comes in and you want to get it out as quickly to people. So it's about that balance, about don't make people feel overwhelmed with the information that you're sending or the volume of times that you're contacting them. So you just need to consider that in terms of what you plan for your marketing process. Alison, back to you, I think.
Yeah, I just want to just briefly sort of mention what your digital footprint might look like. So sort of digital footprint is sort of like your overall digital presence. And what I was sort of thinking is that, to me, sort of like your website is sort of a very formal resource, which you sort of, you know, you provide information to people. There are opportunities to be interactive, i.e. you can have chat facilities, or you can have the ability, obviously, for people to email you from your website and things like that, or potentially even do bookings through your website. But it's a more formal structure, a website, and it does tend to be these days the first place that people will look for information. You know, people will go onto a search engine, be it Google or Bing or whatever, and they will Google so-and-so village hall. So, you know, your website is key to ensuring that people find the right information about your hall very, very quickly. Thinking about sort of like your social media presence, though, I would say social media is obviously a lot more informal. It's much more interactive in that if somebody, you know, you put out a post, if somebody comments on that post, you can then go back. So it's sort of quite a chatty sort of two-way thing of you know, being able to sort of engage on sort of quite a informal basis with people. And, you know, again, you know, particularly younger people who are on social media sort of 24 hours a day almost, you know, will quite often, social media will be the first place that they try to contact you via. You know, they perhaps don't use websites as much, but they will search for you on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, and they may well send you a message through those media. So that's sort of your social media. And then if you think about sort of like, you know, thinking about your more traditional methods that you might have made digital, so like in the old days, you know, you'd have written a newsletter, you'd have printed out copies and you'd have stuffed them through people's front doors, whereas these days, as Lisa was just saying, you know, once you've got your database of users and people who want to hear about your hall, you know, you could look at you know, obviously producing a newsletter. But again, it's likely to be a more formal, I mean, you can keep the tone relatively informal, but it's a formal structure of stuff, you know, sort of a sort of defined structure that you're giving information within, that you're then sending to people. And even if you're sending it digitally or making it available to download via your website, it's still sort of a more formal way of doing things. So I was going to talk to you next about websites, and these are perhaps some of the things that you would expect to see on a website. And as I say, in our November coffee morning, we've got a session particularly looking at websites and how those are designed and built. But just some key points that I think on your homepage of your website, make sure it's very clear about what your hall is, where it is, and where people go to contact you. You will be amazed at the number of halls that don't have that kind of number of websites that don't have that information. That's sort of hidden away at the very bottom, in very small text or whatever, and that could be really, really frustrating for people. Make sure your website's got a sort of what we call a clear navigation structure. So, not too many different sort of sub pages, and make sure the headings are very clear. So, if you've got a page about your booking charges, make sure it's, called booking charges. So it's very, very clear for people to see, where they go for the information they want. The easier you make it for people to navigate around your website, the more likelihood there is that they will stay on that website, spend some time on it, find the information they need, and then act upon that information. If you make it hard for people, they will give up. Less lessons learned from ourselves in the past. So make it as easy as possible for people to navigate. I think users do appreciate information about exactly what facilities your hall has. So again, if you're planning a wedding or a big event, knowing how big the rooms are, how many people can be accommodated, what the different charges are for different, if there's different charges around different times of day or evening, for example, that's good for people to know, and being able to see what the space looks like. People do like that. So if you can have some sort of gallery of images or pictures, how your room, make it easy for people. That's what I always say. If people can visualize, somebody's planning a wedding, if they can see what your hall looks like when it's set up for a wedding, some people don't have much imagination. If you can make it easy for them to see what your hall can look like, it takes it from just being an empty space to, wow, yeah, I could picture myself holding my wedding reception there. So things like that are really good to include on a website. Again, the contact us information. How can people get in contact? Is there a phone number? Is there an email address? Lots of people don't like filling in those sort of contact us forms. They much prefer to see an email address. So you can have both, or you could just stick with the contact us form. But actually, sometimes people prefer seeing what the email address is that they need to actually email. So think about that as well. And this next bullet point is one that Lisa was dead keen that I absolutely mention, because obviously, as somebody that we go out and we visit quite a lot of halls, but you would be amazed at the number of halls that don't put the actual address of the hall on their website. And I think, part of that is because, you're thinking about your hall within your community and you're assuming that people know where your hall is. But obviously people do come from further afield. So it is absolutely critical that people know exactly the address of your hall. And for example, if the sat nav for that postcode takes people somewhere really strange, not to the hall, you might want to put a little note to people to say, oh, the sat nav doesn't take you quite to the address. So when you get to the signpost on the left, turn right or whatever. So yeah, make it easy again for people. There's a thing you can use called Google My Business, and again, that's free. You can update it and it will help bump your hall up the search results, the internet search results. So again, that's a tool you can try there.
Alison, before I just flick over this on this one, just making a comment on this one, it might be useful to use what 3 words as well for directions to your building. And just so people are aware, Cambridge Fire Service actually recommends now that when you have your poster up for emergency contacts in your village hall, which everybody should have an emergency contact poster up. So if an incident happens while somebody's hiring the hall, Cambridge Fire Service is saying include the what 3 words for your venue. The front drive preferably, because obviously it's all 2 metre squares, but the front drive, include those what 3 words on your emergency poster, because that's the way Cambridge Fire Service and the emergency services are acting now based on that system. So I just wanted to mention that now.
Yep, it's a good thought. So just before Lisa talks about some of the actual different types of social media, some of the actual platforms that you can use, I just wanted to talk briefly about social media more generally. And I mentioned earlier what is known as a call to action. And again, it's a bit of a marketing sort of term, but essentially it's what do you want people to do? You know, so anything that you post digitally, how do you want people to react? Do you want them to visit your website? Do you want them to, you know, fill in your survey? Do you want them to share the information that you're posting out? So make sure it's very clear in anything that you post. Don't just post something really non-specific. Make sure it's really, the message that you put out is really quite tight about what you want people to do. So if you want people to share your Facebook post that you put out, please, you know, say in that, you know, really grateful if people could share this to their community group page or their own Facebook pages or whatever. Make it very, very clear about what you need people to do, because that is the way you will get some action as a result of it. If you put something very non-specific and vague out, people will just scroll past it, I'm afraid. So Lisa's going to talk you through some of the actual social media platforms now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so bring on the poll. It sounded as though everybody you know, was pretty much familiar with Facebook and is already active on Facebook. So we won't spend too much time, you know, looking into this in great detail. But I think it's probably worth thinking about how you use Facebook if you do on a personal level. And I certainly use mine for village news, finding out places and organisations of interest, and for shopping. I think generally that's what, you know, people these days are using Facebook for, certainly when I talk to my friends and colleagues about what they would use it for. So I think bear that in mind in terms of when you're posting on your Facebook page and when you're thinking about how you're advertising not only your village hall, but also thinking about the activities that are going on there, is because the more you advertise what your hirers are doing or support your hirers in terms of advertising their events, the more people will attend their events and the more successful they will be. So it's having that knock-on effect, isn't it, into your venue. I tend to think of Facebook as kind of like the modern way of having the village hall notice board, rather than having the posters put up and you know you've got to visit the village hall in order to find out what's going on. I kind of think of Facebook as that medium now. It's I can do it. I can scroll through Facebook while I'm sitting having a cup of tea or something. Mm-hmm. Just looking at the different elements. So I'm sure people are already familiar with this, so we'll just quickly look at this. But the first bullet point on here, we're talking about the profiles. So a profile is an individual. So that would be me and my profile, or you and your profile on Facebook. So very individual, and it's the person that you're presenting as on that platform. And you're connecting on an individual basis between friends, and you're liking pages and you're liking businesses and organisations that are on there. As an individual, you're sharing photos and you're reposting and posting directly to friends or on friends' timelines. So it's quite, I suppose, quite restricted in a sense in terms of what you can do. Groups, which by the sounds of things you're already all familiar with, so again I won't say a great deal about this, but groups are those areas which are private and you tend to be invited to them, or you can ask to join them. So it might be, I know my village has several village groups, and you can be a member of some and not members of others. So I'm sure all of your villages kind of work in a similar format. So you can pretty much choose which group you want to be involved in, or you can be part of all of them. And all of those groups have administrators who will hopefully monitor those posts and clearly not allow posts which aren't appropriate to those sites. So they do have you know, a way of restricting, hopefully, what's happening, because I think we've all seen where there can be a bit of negativity running on village sites from time to time. So if you haven't already got a Facebook page, it can be quite straightforward to set up, and the steps here are clearly set out on this slide. If you do have any problems in setting up a Facebook page, or you want some support and advice, again, we can either visit your hall or and set it up with you in your location, or we can do it over a Zoom. A Zoom meeting is probably the easiest and quickest way to do it. We can hop on a Zoom meeting and just talk you through the process if you're not familiar or confident enough to do it. But it's pretty straightforward, and again, going on the poll, you're probably all there and you're all ahead of us on this one. Twitter isn't probably the most important tool for village halls to use, or not as important as Facebook. Although again, I couldn't see the results of the Twitter, so Alison, you might need to remind me.
I think there was one person said that they have a Twitter page for their feed for their hall. So. Brilliant,
thank you. So so it'd be interesting maybe to hear from whoever had the Twitter account to understand whether they feel that it works for their facility or not.
I think that was Sarah.
I'm afraid it doesn't very well. We set it up way back in order just to get news of things out to more people. So if we're having an event or we're trying to sell tickets for a theatre production or something like that, we thought Twitter would be a good way of getting out to more people, because a lot of people are on Twitter. But to be honest, I've got a different computer at home and it's dropped off, and I haven't got it reset it up. So I think I will reset it up, but I think you're right, it's an add-on. It's something that we will put tweets on just to tell people about things, but we don't really. It's much more of a discussion forum, I think, and I don't think it's so much. And by all means, please contradict me. I don't feel it's quite so valuable to us for what we need it for.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that's why Lisa's saying that it's perhaps not the most important social media for a village hall, just because it does tend to be, it's probably a news thing, as you say, discussion. It's not such a promotional thing, perhaps, but I think it has its place. I mean, I certainly find out a lot of stuff from Twitter myself, but obviously it does rely on people posting, as you say, if your Twitter account's sort of fallen by the wayside a bit, you need to be posting quite regularly in order for those posts to be presented to people, so that you become almost like a recognizable presence. I mean, I don't know if any of you are on Twitter in a sort of a personal capacity, but I'm sure you all know the people who time and time again, their tweets, you see their tweets a lot, they flash up in front of you, the Piers Morgans of this world, or the Joe Biden, US president. If you follow their Twitter accounts, you'll see that they post quite a lot in order for their tweets to build up a sort of a regular presence in your Twitter feed. So I think that's sort of something important to remember with Twitter, is that because it's that second bullet point says about how tweets get old very quickly. Literally in 10 seconds you can have, depending on the number of Twitter accounts you follow, you can have hundreds of tweets come through. So if blink and you miss it, kind of thing. So I think that's an important point with Twitter. Sorry, Lisa.
No, that's absolutely fine, because that's exactly what I was going to say. It's like it needs quite a lot of attention. It's like a needy child, isn't it? You've got to put a lot of effort in with Twitter. But one of the other points on that slide is about, you can pin something that's important. So if you have got an important tweet that you want to pin to the top of your feed, you can do that. So there are some aspects of it that once you're used to using it, you can then take advantage of and kind of expand your use of that platform. So you can, for those who aren't as familiar with Twitter, you can follow people and you can be followed. It's great for quick comments. So if you've got some quick news that you want to put out, or if you've got a link where you want to get people to, from a tweet, you want them people to visit your website. So you can use it for a quick comment and please look for further information, look here, which will then drive people to your website. So I think, you know, as Alison said, it has its place. Twitter's not my personal choice of platform, but some people absolutely love it. So you need to make a decision locally about where your energy goes, I suppose. Again, this is the setup for setting up a Twitter account. Again, if you wanted help and support in setting up on this platform, you know, we can do that with you, but it should be quite straightforward. Obviously, you'll get a copy of these slides, so you can review these in your own time, but we'll just skip over that at the moment. So what's good for Twitter? Promoting everything that you can do in your hall. You know, as you can see from this slide, there's lots of ways in which you can get your message out. On Twitter particularly, hashtags are really important. It's a way to connect people with your conversation and get people to find your content and similar content. So thinking about the hashtags you use is probably going to be quite an important part before you're actually really active on Twitter. You know, what hashtags do fit your organisation. For example, there is a hashtag which is quite popular, which is hashtag village halls. There's also loads which run around kind of like the whole ACRE network. So if you had a message that you wanted to get out to nationally, to ACRE, for example, to pick up with the ACRE network, you could say, you know, we've just installed, you know, charging points in our car park, hashtag ACRE network. Then everybody who is involved with village halls, who has a Twitter account, hopefully would be able to search ACRE network and find your tweet and find your information. So it can be really beneficial if you want to reach far beyond your local community as well. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So what to tweet and when. Twitter, unlike Facebook, does have a limit on the number of characters, so you do need to have a bit more planning in terms of the size of the message that you're putting out. I would absolutely recommend, if you're using Twitter, to have a photo. I think people are drawn more to tweets that have an image associated with them than if it's just text. I know that certainly attracts my eye more. Amazingly, you could actually do up to 4 photos with a tweet. If you've got renovation one where you want to get capture lots of images of your renovation in one tweet. So don't forget about retweeting other people's information. So you can retweet on Twitter. You can join conversations on Twitter. Don't feel that you shouldn't ask people to retweet your tweets. You know, it's quite common to see on a tweet, please RT, please retweet. So it's about building that conversation and building that engagement. And don't forget, it's really important that when you're doing your hashtags, don't forget to mention other organisations as well. So it might be other groups in your community that use the facility. You might want to mention, if the brownies or the guides have got something going on and they've got a Twitter account, mention them. Or again, you might want to mention something to the wider, a national message in terms of mentioning ACRE and other organisations, funders especially. It's probably a really good platform to use if you've received some funding, to then mention about the funding that you've received, and obviously mentioning national lottery or local authorities or whoever, because you're then you're getting quite a wide audience then. You can direct message on Twitter as well, but you do have to remember that if you are direct messaging somebody, you have to follow them and they have to follow you in order to be able to direct message. But you do have that ability to direct message people as well as you would on Facebook. So that's just, I mean, this one really is a kind of a list of hints and tips for you in terms of you know, things I've already mentioned about the, you know, don't forget about retweeting and liking via Twitter, really important aspects of building that engagement and building that conversation. Have a little look at, okay, so the next slide, hashtags, mentioned them a little while ago. So, you know, there is, as it says here, in terms of a useful guide for looking for hashtags, setting up hashtags, visit that website. You can have a look around in terms of what would work for you. There's some examples there in terms of generic ones, hashtag Village Hall. One which I'm quite keen to build on. There currently isn't much movement around CAM's Village Halls, and it'd be really great if we could actually build that hashtag so that, you know, Cambridgeshire Village Halls always put CAM's Village Halls on their tweets, and then again it's kind of, it makes that easy search for any of us in the network trying to find a conversation that's going on around Cambridgeshire Village Halls. Bearing in mind, the first one there says about create your own hashtag with your village hall. Just be mindful of the fact that you are restricted to characters. So the longer your hashtag is, the less you're going to have in terms of content that you can put in. So I'm thinking of a village hall like Little Thetford or, you know, Little Downham Village Hall. You're using lots of characters. So, you know, think how you can use something that personalizes it to your village hall, but you know, you're not using all of your letters up. And Alison, I think we're back to you, actually.
I was just going to talk briefly about newsletters. I don't know, obviously, how many of you put a newsletter out currently. Obviously, there are sort of ways you can do that. There's lots of ways and means. I mean, you can just, you know, create a document in Word and turn it into a PDF and ping it out on an email to people. I mean, that's one way. What you might find, though, is if you start sending just a general email out with an attachment to lots of email addresses, you might find that you get people, it gets reported as spam, and people don't actually receive your newsletter. It'll end up in their junk mail, and there's sometimes not an awful lot you can do about that. Once it happens, there's not much you can actually do to retrieve that situation. So one of the things you might like to do is to look at using some sort of proper mailing software. And the one that we've used in Cambridgeshire ACRE until very recently, I say we've recently invested into our marketing, so we're using a different paid for system now, but the free one that we used was one called MailChimp, which you may have heard of. You can see the website address for it there. It's free, it's good and easy to use. I would say it's actually quite intuitive. It's not one you can probably work it out for yourself without much training. But as Lisa said, you know, if anybody would like to have a sort of a one-to-one session on how do I set myself up on MailChimp, how do I set up a newsletter template and get it to work, we'd be really happy to sit down with anybody on a one-to-one basis to do that. So I say MailChimp is good from that perspective, and obviously once your templates are set up, it's then quite easy to then sort of use them again and again, just editing the actual content each time. And obviously it's good from a GDPR perspective because there's obviously the option for people to unsubscribe if they decide they don't want to receive your communication. So that's one we've got good experience of, and can recommend ourselves. The second one mentioned there is one called Constant Contact. It's not one I've used myself. Apparently you get so it's been recommended to us and you can get a free trial of it, but then there is a sort of a subscription fee after that. So again, it's somebody's told us it's good. I can't honestly put my hand on my heart and say that myself, but it might be, if you don't like MailChimp, it might be one to have a look at if you fancy that. The next thing I was just going to talk about was when we think was it step 4 earlier I was talking about, which is about evaluating what you do and trying to work out if what you're doing is effective. And I think what I would say is there's no point in putting all this effort in if you don't really know whether it's having any effect or not. So I think it's important to have an idea about what you want to achieve through your marketing. You know, do you want to try and get you know, some additional hires? Do you want to try and just make sure you know everybody in your village knows what's going on at your hall? And then it's thinking about how you're going to measure that. So you know, and how you're going to know whether your marketing communications have been effective. There are some tools that you can use that will allow you to do that. So, for example, with websites, you can connect your website to something called Google Analytics, and that'll tell you, you know, how many visitors your website is getting. And it might be something that, you know, if you have already got websites, which is, it does seem that everybody has, that may well have been built into when you had your website designed. But you know, if you aren't familiar with that, if you aren't familiar with you know whether your website is doing that, it might be worth talking to whoever set your website up and seeing what kind of tracking they do of the visitors to your website, for example. With social media, they all have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, they all have analytics and insights built in. So I mean, again, if you just Google sort of, you know, Facebook sort of analytics and insights, you'll get instructions for how to get to that. Sorry, my plumber's just decided to start working my bathroom. You'll have to ignore the bashing if you can hear it. So yeah, social media analytics, you know, will tell you how many people have interacted with each post you put out and whether they've done anything. So whether they have clicked on the link. So if you know, if in your Facebook post you've said please visit our website, that social media insights analytics page will tell you how many people have actually done that. So you'll be able to see whether the types of things that you're putting out are engaging people. And obviously, if you're not engaging people, if you know you look at your insights and nobody's engaged with your post, you might want to tweak it, do something slightly different next time, use a different headline, use something that you know perhaps might engage people a bit more. And then talking about MailChimp, so for newsletters, MailChimp has a very, very good analytics page. So for every email you send out through MailChimp, you'll be able to see how many people opened it, how many people clicked on any links that you included in your newsletter. So again, that's important because it does allow you to see if what you're doing is having an effect, and that's obviously critical. If you're putting the time and the effort in, you want to know that you're getting a result as a for everything that you've done. So I mean, I think this is just a reminder, really. You know, think about what you want to achieve, when you want to achieve it by. Make sure it's realistic. Don't set yourself, you know, totally unrealistic targets, because there's nothing worse than not meeting it because you've been overly ambitious. And then think about how you're going to measure what you've done and know whether it's successful. Just wanted to briefly mention logos, graphics and design. This is a lovely tool that you might like to have a look at, because again, it's completely free. You can upgrade to a professional account, but I found that the free account is perfectly okay for what I need. So I suspect it'd probably be okay for you as well. This one's called Canva, and essentially what you can do on that is you can create posters, you can create any kind of document, menus, oh gosh, I mean, absolutely anything and everything, posts to go on social media, things like that. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to drop images in and then overlay them with text, and to sort of create pretty inspiring sort of graphics and designs. And once you've created them online, you can download them, and then you can either print them out or you can download them digitally, so you can attach them to your Facebook posts or whatever that you're sending out, or onto your website, things like that. It's not a professional tool by any standard. I'm sure professionals would probably turn their noses up at it, but it is easy to use. It is free, and as I say, I think you'll probably quite enjoy using it. And if Lisa just nips onto the next slide, you can see, you know, you can take an image. As you can see, the image on the left is just one that we sourced off the internet, and then we've sort of overlaid some text on it, and we now use that image in our newsletter that we send out to one of our projects. You can see the type. I mean, that's a very simple example, but you can see the sorts of things you can do that you can then see how you might then use those in your marketing materials. So I think just to summarise, I think what I would say is that your marketing, your digital marketing, it's not necessarily about hard cash. You don't need to throw vast sums of money at it. I think what you can see there is we've talked about lots of free techniques and things that you can do, is just lots of tools that are completely free for you to access. But what I would say it does need is sort of investment in terms of people and skills and time. So you do need to be prepared to sit down, work out what you need to do, and find the people who have got the skills and the time to actually do those things for you. So I think that's probably the point that I would end on there. So any questions? Shall I stop sharing for a moment? And I don't know if anybody's got any questions now.
John did mention in the chat, I don't know if everybody saw it, but there's an alternative that John uses to MailChimp. John, I don't know if you wanted to explain what that was, because that might be useful for other people to hear about. Oh, you're on mute still, John.
I have used MailChimp before with a different organisation, and we were going to use it with our new website, but our web builder said that he would recommend MailPoet, which is another one of these things, which is specifically, specially configured to work with WordPress-based websites. It's a plugin, it plugs in very easily to WordPress-based websites. So that's what we're planning to use. It's free if you've got up to 1,000 subscribers, and you can. What I like about this sort of thing like MailChimp is you can automatically upload your addresses, email addresses, and configure them to different audiences. So we planned, for example, to have a group who are members of our 300 club, and that will be a mechanism for reminding them to pay, and and so on and so forth. And similarly for events. And of course, on each of these things, you can add a box at the bottom that says, do you want to continue to receive this, or blah, blah, blah. It's all compliant. And as I say, they seem to be very straightforward tools. I mean, I was using MailChimp, but it was recommended that MailPoet fitted with a WordPress-based website better.
That's lovely. Thanks, John. I think we'll do a little bit of research on that one as well, so we can add it to our list of tools to recommend if it's a good fit. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Yeah.
Alison, Mike's asked about Instagram.
Yes, that's another social media. I don't know whether we could just have a show of hands. Is anybody on Instagram personally? Yeah. Oh, look at that. Yeah, excellent. Okay, so I mean, it is a tool. Again, I'd be happy to show people how to use. It's one as Cambridgeshire ACRE we've just recently got into. It's again, I think from my research that I've done, looking at seeing what other village halls are on there, there's not thousands of village halls on there. So, but again, it's another tool in your arsenal. It's very picture based, obviously, as you would anybody who's been on there would expect. So it's about having good visuals. If you're going to use Instagram, it's very easy to use. I mean, essentially, you take a picture and you upload it with some hashtags and perhaps some text directing people to look at your website where they can find more information. But yeah, it does rely on having good pictures, I would say. So again, it's yeah. I don't know, Mike, you can take yourself off mute if you want. I don't know if you had any sort of more specific questions, or whether you'd like a session looking at it specifically, or.
No, not really. I just keep hearing about it, and I've never quite understood why it is so popular.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say, I think with all social media, I think it's one of those things. My young nieces and nephews say to me, by the time you're on it, we've all moved on to something else. And I think that's what I would say about Facebook. You know, by the time people of our age got onto Facebook, young people had gone on to the next thing, Snapchat or Instagram or whatever. And I suspect that's always going to be the case. There's always going to be the next big thing. So I think, you know, we'll just have to keep playing catch up. I say, you know, I think it's probably better to do one social media well than try and do all of them poorly. So, you know, I think Lisa said earlier, you know, think about where you want to focus your energy, you know, and if you have good, strong community Facebook groups, then to me, it almost makes sense to put your energy into Facebook, because then you can share your posts with those groups and you'll be sure that you're hitting a huge audience of people. Whereas if you just do Instagram and the rest of your village aren't on Instagram, who are you preaching to? You know, who are you reaching out to? You're not reaching anybody who you want to reach. So that's what I would say. Focus on one and do it really well.
The other thing about MailChimp is when you do the setup, you can set it up to automatically link to your Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. So if you do a letter, for example, advertising an event on MailChimp, you can set the function to automatically post to those other places. So there are ways of saving yourself time through these applications. So it is worth kind of investigating how you can link them together. It is quite easy. When I use MailChimp, I used to link it to Facebook and Twitter for village hall communications, and so it would automatically appear. So it's worth having a look at that.
Okay. Right, I don't know if anybody's got any more questions, or I mean, I think this is the first time we've run a session like this, so we weren't sort of quite sure sort of what level people would be at and whether the information we've given would be useful. So I don't know if we've hit the brief, or whether there's anything more you would have liked, or so if anybody's got any feedback on that, we're happy to take it.
We've got the poll to run as well, Alison, haven't we? At the end poll, yeah.
And I just think I'm quite with it with digital Facebook and things, but I know that some of my other trustees aren't. And also we've just done a survey in the village and we found that the young have responded, and all right, I'm elderly, the elderly haven't. And so I'm sort of worried about how we can get to the elderly.
Yes, and it may be that perhaps digital marketing isn't the right solution for reaching that audience. You know, if they haven't responded to if you've done an online survey, if they haven't responded to that, it suggests that perhaps that's not the method for reaching them. And it may be you have to think about, well, how do I reach into those groups? So it could be you go a lot, you know, I don't know, you're in Girton, aren't you, Margaret? So, you know, perhaps in the other community building, you know, perhaps if there are older people's groups operating there, whether you ask whether you can go in and talk to them. I know there's residential places, isn't there, where older people's communities, you know, perhaps you can drop leaflets off at places like that. I know when we worked in Girton, that was one of the things that we did. We went into the older people's, the sheltered accommodation, said, oh, is it okay if we leave some leaflets or whatever? So I think, you just have, it's horses for courses. You've got to think about, you know, what's going to reach your intended audience. And if digital doesn't do it, then, you know, there's no harm in saying, actually, it doesn't reach everybody, let's do something different. So yeah, that's a good point. Sarah, sorry, you had your hand up as well.
Oh, thank you, Alison. Firstly, just to say thank you very much for a very informative and friendly presentation, and very helpful. Thank you. It's actually prompted me to just re-engage with a few things that I've let drop. I think this last 18 months, you know, has been so debilitating. I think that it's been, however much energy you had for marketing and things before, certainly for me, it's one of my chief activities that I'm supposed to be doing. And I you know, you kind of lose impetus really. So it's really helped get me sort of back on track with a few things. One thing I would personally find helpful, I don't know whether anyone else would feel the same, is perhaps coming up to perhaps near the end of the year, just do a little sort of, get whoever wants to come on and talk about what's been working for them and what hasn't been working for them, you know, and sort of what they do, because everyone's probably got slightly different audiences, everyone's got slightly different needs and requirements. We're perhaps more commercial than a lot of village halls because we have to have a lot of hirers in order to break even, which is what we need to do. So and it would just be really useful to talk to other people, just to find in this kind of format, just for everyone to say, well, we've done this year and we found this is really helping us, or something they've done that hasn't worked. Just compare notes really, and sort of have it as maybe an hour session where people can just do what we're doing now, but just talk a bit about what we find is working well and what isn't.
Yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. I mean, I think that's what one of the things we always say is that there's nothing better than hearing it from somebody else who's doing the same job. You know, we can offer advice, but actually, you know what works in your hall. So yeah, we'd love to facilitate something like that. So we could perhaps do that sort of December time. Do you think perhaps as a sort of grab a cup of coffee and just come and have a chat?
I mean, that's what I was thinking. Yes, I mean, just keep it as an hour.
Yeah.
Keep it on the morning like this morning, and then do exactly the format that you've done today, which I think works well. With the two of you sort of leading the conversation, maybe with a few themes to cover, but just give it a chance for people to say what they're doing and what they want help with as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Would other people find that helpful, do you think?
Yeah,
everybody's shaking. Yeah, he's nodding, so that's good. Yeah, brilliant. Okay, we'll sort that out.
Because we've also got the opportunity in November when Witcham Village Hall are going to do a short presentation on developing their website. So we can always expand that a little bit at the end as well, if people just want to have a general conversation about, you know, what's worked for them. So there'll be another opportunity there as well to do that.
I think Beth's put a question in the chat about attracting corporate and commercial hirers and how to do that. That's a whole field in itself, isn't it? One of the things that I have experience of, because I think probably as Margaret knows, Cambridgeshire ACRE was involved in setting up a new community building in Girton, and one of the things that we did there when we were looking at how we could attract commercial audiences was we hosted a breakfast session. So we did a whole lot of research on all the businesses that sort of operated within a sort of a 5-mile sort of radius of the centre, thinking that was sort of, you know, quite a sort of a reasonable travel distance, and then we invited them along to a breakfast session, sort of pre-work time. Sort of said, you know, here's a whole load of pastries, bacon sandwiches, teas, coffees, you know, come along and have a look at our facilities, and then we made sure there was plenty of staff and trustees there to sort of show people, chat to people, show them around, show them what facilities we had, you know, show them all the IT kit, etc. that we had. And just like, you know, this is an opportunity for you as a local business. I mean, A, you're supporting us as a charity, but B, you know, this is a really usable space if you want to take your staff off site into a sort of a different atmosphere, you know, with the right facilities for running sort of, you know, conferences or meetings, all that kind of thing. Then and that paid dividends for us. You know, it actually sort of raised our profile with that sort of local commercial audience, and we did get some bookings as a result of it. So that's definitely something you can do. But yeah, I think it does come down to doing your research, finding out who's out there who might want to use your facility, and then just getting in touch with them. You know, ring up, find the person. I mean, you know, and this comes back to what I was saying earlier about it's about time. It's about having somebody, and what Sarah says, somebody who's got the energy to hit the phones or hit the internet, do the research, pick up the phone, send the emails, you know. So it is about having the time, and I do appreciate that's, you know, that's quite time consuming, but yeah, if you can do that, then yeah, it is probably worth that's the way to tackle it. Yeah. John, you've got your hand up.
Right. I just wanted to mention Ticket Source as a plugin, which we use to sell our tickets, and it's obviously plugged into our website so that people just have to go to one place to book things. We started to use it just for drama sessions, you know, because it allows you to sell tickets for specific seats, and even configured it for a socially distanced groups and things, all sorts of things. But now we've started to use it for our other events, the bigger ones, like dances and beer fests and things, which we are venturing into in the next month. it helps because people pay online. We don't have to handle money, and it goes straight into our bank, which is great in the new world. And it encourages people to start going online, dare I say. Yeah. You know, the other thing is, of course, it provides more free advertising, because if you look on our website, we've got a couple of events coming up in September. It's revealed by Ticket Source, so you click on there and it tells you all about the events and so on, so as well as their own site. So it's another way of communicating events, and also you know, selling tickets, and you know, basically the system is free. You just have to choose whether or not you so to speak, pay the fee yourself by building it into the ticket price, or you you know, or you hide it.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, John. If anybody doesn't know, John's from Offord Village Hall, aren't you, John? So if,
yes,
if anybody wants to look at their website to see how that particular thing works, then that's the website to Google. Brilliant. Okay, has anybody got any more questions at this point? Perhaps not. Okay, Lisa.